Nick Fuentes. People have said a lot about him. He's growing in popularity. He's done some huge interviews recently. He has been praised, he has been vilified, and some say he is the future. Now today, I want to tell you a story, and I want to talk about Nick's influence and his story for what it really is. It is ultimately a tragedy and warning for us all. Now why do I say this? Well, unlike other people, and to expose myself, I actually used to watch Nick Fuentes, and he has been very influential in my life. This was all the way back in 2018, 2019, when he was still doing live streams on YouTube. I got into politics in 2016 with the Trump election. I watched people like Lauren Southern, PragerU, Stefan Molyneux, James Alsop, and then I stumbled across a Clips channel showing Nick. He was a Zoomer like me. He was charismatic. He was super funny. He was radical, and he said things that were not PC at all, even farther than I would go. But there was something entertaining about it. It was a little bit of rage bait. What was the most impactful was when he talked about God, when he had these serious moments where he talked about the emptiness of modern society. I remember him specifically talking about Dostoevsky in his writings on how when a man feels like he is just a piano key, just a worker, just a consumer, and no agency in his life, he will assert his existence. And that's why we see people do this crazy radical stuff, I think, in the world, is because people just feel like a cog in the machine. And this really stuck out to me as someone who wasn't raised with a religion. I was an atheist because I watched people like Amazing Atheists. His way of talking about atheism and nihilism and meaninglessness and how Christianity and Christ specifically solves that really stuck out to me. And getting in the conservative politics, I had become more sympathetic to Christianity. I thought it served a utilitarian purpose of having a community center, of helping families, of national identity. And it got me to go and visit a church. He got me interested, which led me to looking deeper into apologetics because I naturally had all these questions coming from an atheistic background. I kept watching and heard him talk about the Catholic Church specifically, that it was the most traditional. And he brought up Matthew 16, that Peter has the keys and the Catholic Church is the oldest. I didn't know about the Orthodox Church yet, but he basically made a case, I thought, for me at that time, it was a strong case for the Catholic Church, that it was against birth control and 4 big families, which would solve the modern problem of nations not having enough kids. So I actually started identifying as Catholic and going to RCIA in 2019 because I thought, I have literally nothing to lose and everything to gain by going to church and just trying this out. And what I found was I really started to believe and know God. I slowly moved away from watching him because I realized that he was not helping my Catholic faith. And actually, he was hurting it. He was talking about politics, a lot of anger and angst and rage and rebellion and everything wrong, versus in Catholic RCIA, in reading the Bible, it was different. And so I started to just listen to Catholic influencers online instead of listening to Nick. And Nick was a good starting place for me. I was in the depths of the world, into ideology and politics. But it made me realize what I was looking for was not a political leader or an ideology, but truth. And that truth was a person in Christ. And Nick would talk about the person of Christ and the power of church and forgiveness and these things, but it was laced with a poison pill of his radical, racial politics and ideology and sarcasm and irony and all of these things. There was a poison pill with it. And so I started to just focus on my faith, and I was thankful that he got me started on the journey. And when I was Catholic, I saw his channel got removed from YouTube in 2020. And I saw him make his own platform. I never was a groyper. I think that came after I was watching him. But my focus had really shifted from politics to Christianity. And when churches closed in the crazy world of 2020, riots, politics, I would occasionally listen in to Nick just out of boredom. And I even actually called in the Good Morning Groyper once. But what I noticed in myself whenever I watched his stream is I didn't feel edified. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel enlightened. I didn't feel peace. I didn't feel really anything good. What I did feel was angry, bitter, and that I was owed a lot. I felt hate also. And I justified it because I'm like, oh, Nick is Catholic. as Catholic guys, we're fighting evil in the world. So of course we're not going to be perfect, but at least we're not like the other people who are promoting all this evil. Now, thank God, churches started to open again, and I was able to get more involved in my church. It was really hard during COVID, and I just started watching him again out of boredom. But I noticed how harmful it was for me, that it was really hurting my faith. And when churches started opening again, I got more involved in my RCIA class. I started hanging out with local Catholic groups, and this helped my faith so much. I didn't feel this bitterness or hatred, these fruits of the Spirit, when I was focusing on my faith and not ideology and politics. And so I actually had peace and hope for the future. And I realized that every step I was taking towards my faith more seriously was a step away from the content that Nick was posting. Every time I watched him, it was like a relapse. What I now know is giving into the passions such as wrath, anger, bitterness. That's an average Nick Fuentes live stream. That's all it's about, is just wrath, anger, bitterness. Here's this awful thing. Here's why the entire system is corrupt. It all needs to be burned down. Here's why no one is conservative enough. I'm the most right-wing person. And it wasn't good. And so just taking more and more steps away from his content. And I kept taking my faith seriously, and thank God that led me to Holy Orthodoxy. And that has been a well of truth, beauty, goodness, and I've grown so much, and I've really understood the heart of Christianity, the depth of Christianity, by reading the Orthodox saints, is learning to love everyone, knowing what that really means, being forgiving, not being filled with anger and bitterness, but really having peace. That's what the fruits of the Spirit are. And that's what Orthodoxy has helped me so much, and the living testimony of the saints. Now, being on YouTube, I also watch people like Sneeko every once in a while because he had some cool videos, good interviews. And then there's a crazy Andrew Tate phenomenon. Then I saw that Nick and Sneeko collabed, and it was like I had moved past this for myself, but I saw that Nick was continuing to grow because obviously he's very charismatic, he's funny, he's very good at debating. I think this was back in 2022, 2023. There was the Kanye thing when he was running for president and Nick was involved. It was interesting to see Nick become more and more popular, meeting people like Kanye, having dinner with Donald Trump, getting on the Fresh and Fit podcast. And then now we see he's been on Valuetainment, Tucker Carlson, now in 2025. And now he's growing more and more. But now it has become crystal clear what the problem is and why the story of Nick Fuentes is a tragedy and why I don't recommend anyone watching his content. Now, first I want to say Nick Fuentes is a victim of identity politics in the US, struggling from his own talents and potential, cancel culture, Gen Z irony and sarcasm. Now, let me explain. Nick got red-pilled on 4chan, reading books, seeing Antifa radicals at his college, and he has explained this many times. And seeing the bitterness and intolerance of the left in racial identity politics and, anti-white hatred, he became very, very reactionary. Now, the thing is, I think everyone, white, black, gay, leftist, conservative, they go through a phase where you are immature and super radical. Someone goes through like a leftist phase of promoting BLM and all cops are bastards. And Nick Fuentes is just the right-wing version of that. He doesn't just speak for himself. There's lots of people. There's probably millions of people like him. For 99% of people, you get no attention. No one cares. You don't broadcast it to the world. People's views change and mature with time. So it's like people have this radical phase where you believe dumb things or say things in a very immature way, but it's not getting broadcasted to the world. Well, Nick, he went to Boston University for politics. He wanted to be in politics. So naturally, he started a show and started broadcasting himself. And because he was funny, smart, charismatic, great debater, he was very successful very fast. And this set him down at the trajectory he is on because he was seen as a real threat, which caused him to be canceled instead of having the natural time to mature and make mistakes. Most people, they post immature memes and, no one's looking. But a lot of people were looking at Nick and he was canceled. And he basically made mistakes that were multiplied in intensity by his audience and success. And he was canceled hard where he could never have a normal life. This is a warning to be careful when you are young. You might just get what you want. You reap the consequences of what you do. And so don't broadcast yourself when you are still being developed and you're saying stuff just to be edgy. And this is one of the dangers of cancel culture, is that instead of keeping a leper in society, trying to heal and help them, what it does is isolate them and vindicate their sense of being attacked. His cancellation, or his martyrdom, only emboldened his beliefs and made him more radical. And it all makes sense. I remember these key moments about him talking, I need to be the most right-wing person. I need to be the right flank of the GOP. I need to be the AOC of the right. Now, this is, first of all, playing into the passions and very reactionary, very Nietzschean, just about will to power. Now he's no longer doing what he thinks is correct. He's just doing the most right-wing reactionary thing, being the most reactionary guy, saying the most out there things, saying the most rage bait things because he has been canceled and he feels like he has no other way. This is his role. He now has to play a role of being the most right-wing person. It's like putting on a show. And that's what I think his show kind of is. It's him putting on a show. Deep down, I don't think what we're seeing on the live streams and in the interviews is who he really is. But he's putting on a show. He's putting on this act of trying to always be the most reactionary right-wing person, which includes trying to normalize radical ideological ideas. This has become his identity. And that's why his content is largely rage bait, really making people rage, wrath on both sides. People who love him, they love his content. People who hate him, they absolutely hate him. It's playing into the passions, and it's not healing society. It's actually just making things worse. We need to focus on healing society. We don't need a revolution. Revolutions are not Christian. Christianity is about working within a society and healing and loving our neighbor, not saying we want to destroy our neighbor. And it's not only that, but it's also that Nick is uniquely Zoomer. He is Gen Z. And because of his cancellation and that fueling his further radicalization, I think this caused him to be petrified and be in a perpetual state of being immature, of making jokes with lots of irony, sarcasm, the humor economy of Gen Z. And he's really good at playing into these. But the thing is about this with irony and sarcasm is that it usually is anger, frustration, or insecurity wearing a mask. That's what sarcasm and irony is. And this is how Gen Z copes. Left and right, they both use irony and sarcasm. And this is a really bad coping mechanism. Instead of people saying what they mean, they say the opposite, hoping the other person gets it. Sarcasm gives you a way of saying something really hurtful, but then denying it as, oh, I was just joking. It was just a meme. You're too sensitive. And this is very emotionally manipulative. And you get to attack without taking responsibility for the attack. That's why it's passive aggressive. And this is a huge problem. Nick, from the very start, was interested in very important and sensitive topics, like literally the most sensitive topics you could ever think of. And if you're going to talk about those topics, you need to be very, very, very mature. I've fallen into this myself when talking about religion is something that requires a lot of reverence, and I made a lot of mistakes. Now, Nick liked the most controversial political topics like racial relations in the US, problems plaguing the black community in America, mass immigration and cultural change, isolation of men, feminism, LGBTQ pride, the Israel lobby, overrepresentation of people with Jewish ancestry in the media, the Holocaust. All of these are huge, important topics. The problem is that he would mix immaturity and sarcasm and irony with the serious discussion of these, making jokes about cookies, the Austrian painter. And then when people are like, this guy's really bad, there's a defensiveness saying, oh, it was just a joke, masking the truth about it. About truly, it's not a joke. It's like he believes a lot of these things. And so masking these, like people who don't like him or people who criticize him, it's like he's not treating these in a reverent way. If you want people to think you are a serious person, you have to act like a serious person. And because he was young and in college, he's basically petrified in this unserious nature. And now he's just become more hardened. And now he's like self-identifying as an incel and all of these things. And it's like, I really don't think this is who he is, but he is so reactionary, and he's been petrified in basically a college version of himself. The thing is that your words really matter because you're going to be accountable to God for what you say, including your jokes. And sarcasm and irony are not virtuous. They're bad. They're passive aggressive. You should be direct. It's fine to make jokes, but they should be funny and they should not be laced in serious conversation in this way. And I think that's a huge reason why he was canceled, because it's like he was not approaching these serious topics with reverence. If you're going to talk about various serious topics, you're going to need to bring a serious mentality all the time. You can't just lace in all this other stuff. And I know this for a fact because there are lots of people who talk about all the issues that he talks about and they don't get canceled because they actually treat it with reverence and respect and sensitivity and gentleness. There's lots of conservative Black Christians that talk about the really damaging effects of some toxic aspects of rap and Black culture and the bad problems of the single motherhood in the Black community and how that's really hurt the Black community. There's channels that talk about the problems with the Israel lobby in America. There's channels that talk about Jewish overrepresentation in the media. There's channels that talk about the craziness of pride. I mean, there's gay people who talk about how pride goes too far. All of these issues, you can have the uncomfortable, truthful conversation, but it needs maturity, sensitivity, and gentleness. His live stream has never been described in that way. And instead, he talks about these very important, sensitive issues in a mocking, agitating, making fun of, and no reverence or sensitivity. So he wasn't canceled because he was just asking the wrong questions. There's lots of people who are very critical of the Israel lobby, who are very critical of mass migration. You name the issue, there are people who are critical of it, but it is the way in which Nick underwent it, mixing immaturity and hiding behind irony and sarcasm, and being stuck in that since college. And sadly, the route he has gone has just hardened his heart more and more, saying things like, never apologize. You never want to apologize because that means you did something wrong. But in Christian life, it's key to apologize, to admit your faults, speaking the truth in love. Nick Fuentes often cusses because he's trying to make a point. He's trying to stir the passions, and he's really good at it. And so speaking in the truth in love is so important. It's fine to be interested in these political opinions, but you need to be tempered by how you are saying it, the way you are saying it. And so this is a real tragedy that someone, Nick, who had so much potential, ruined it because of their own immaturity and doubling down on an identity that isn't Christian and actually subverts Christianity. Because the reply to all of these is, he's Catholic. He's not racist. He loves everyone. Look he talks to all different people. Now, I think your critics can tell you a lot about yourself, and there is a reason he invokes the reaction that he does of people on the left, because the left spews this venom, and Nick basically spews that venom back. He is the far right, just like there's a far left who is very venomous, like Antifa, these leftists. They're very hateful, bitter people. There's lots of them. But Nick's like, okay, I'm taking gloves off. I'm going to spit this venom back. But that's not the mindset of Christianity. And it's very easy to idolize people, especially people who have helped you. And I'm sure he's helped young men in great ways, getting them to be sober, getting them to go to church. And again, not everything he says is wrong. Again, him talking about God, he's completely right. But there's also lots of room for criticism. And it is poisonous listening to him. And that is why if you are a fan, ultimately, you're going to have this same realization, is that the more you step towards Christ and the saints, naturally you're going to go apart from worldly things, from ideology. And Nick preaches ideology, and he mixes it with truth. He subverts the truth. It's exactly what the devil does. There are right and left-wing demons. They speak to our passions. That is the danger, is losing yourself to worldly matters when we serve a kingdom that is not of this world. Antichrist is a spirit. It's a battle within us all. Left wing, right wing, being radical, we all struggle with this. And Antichrist spirit can deceive everyone, even the elect. And that's the sad thing, is that Nick in his audience, he has the potential to really be transformative in an amazing way. The poisonous elements of the ideology he preaches, making people bitter and hateful and have more racialist attitudes and discriminatory attitudes, is not good. It's not good for their soul. And I think it's pretty obvious that Nick is not just following Christianity. And it's very clear if you're familiar with his content. He's talked about who he's read. He talked about Julius Evola. He is not a Christian. And his ideology is that Christianity, even Orthodox and Catholic spirituality, that it's weakening, egalitarian, descendant, too focused on humility, mercy, and compassion. He preferred pagan, pre-Christian warrior traditions and openly criticized Christian morality. Evola was seen as too radical, too mystical, and too anti-Christian. He positioned himself as to the right of fascism, but fascists never adopted him as their official philosopher. And that's often how Nick describes himself, as he is the most far-right guy. And I also remember him talking about white men have this Faustian spirit as a good thing. So for those who don't know what the Faustian spirit is, the concept is named after the character Faust, who appears in a German legend and was later featured in works like Christopher Marlowe's play, Dr. Faust. The Faustian bargain, involves trading something of immense value, often one's own soul or morals, with the devil, for immediate gratification, power, or success. The consequences is that the bargain is not a one-time deal. It implies a future, often sinister, consequence of reckoning for the sacrifices made, when the initial gains come at a terrible long-term cost. The Faustian spirit describes any ambition that pushes the boundary of human limits, leading to a potential self-destructive pursuit of power, knowledge, or progress without regard for the moral implications. It can be seen in a relentless ambition of modern society and unchecked scientific and technological advancements. And this is a problem, is he speaks of this like it's a good thing. It's just a small moment, but it's things like this. This is someone who claims to be Catholic, but they're clearly influenced by these other forces, and they're talking about these things as a good thing, like racial pride, like talking about the achievements of European civilization. Like, look at, the European man has a Faustian spirit, and that's a good thing. It's like, is it? If that man is spiritually dead, look at the West. It's not in a spiritually healthy state. It is completely atheistic. The point is, you don't have to guess what is guiding him. He says it plainly. He's praised the Austrian painter many times, and Stalin.
Because that's an important date to me. And it's Joseph Stalin's birthday.
Oh.
I'm a fan.
You're a fan of Stalin's?
Mm-hmm. Always an admirer. But we don't need to go into that. I guess.
Well, that's...
And even praising ideologues from the 20th century that were extremely authoritarian and created the most brutal regimes. Because both the Austrian painter and Stalin had deep structural similarities. Both arose from societies filled with humiliation, economic collapse, cultural fragmentation, fear, longing for order, desire for a new beginning. This combination creates the revolutionary, reactionary energy that produces charismatic dictators. And we can see that Nick has a positive view of Stalin. And so this is the question we have to ask ourselves, is who do we look up to? We have to look to Christ and the saints, because if we don't, we're going to look to political leaders. And Nick Fuentes, he is a charismatic guy, but he has a revolutionary, reactionary mindset, that he is a demagogue. He is modeling himself after these people about burn it all down. We need to bring back the golden age. We need to bring back the 1950s. The thing is that he plays into people's fears, that people feel betrayed by the present, that institutions have failed, leaders are corrupt, the culture is decaying, moral order has collapsed, which can all be true, but it doesn't mean we need a revolution. Revolutions are not Christian. Christianity spreads through marriage, time, and culturation, not revolution. Is that Christianity was spread on the blood of martyrs, not a political revolution. And that is absolutely key. Is that Christianity works within systems. It does not overthrow systems. What Nick really is he is very similar to these demagogues that we read about. He's a strong voice, a charismatic leader, someone who promises clarity, someone who blames the right enemies, someone who speaks with absolute confidence. He thinks he's the voice of the people. He thinks he acts like a warrior against corruption. People follow them because he offers them a solution, a false salvation. This is exactly what the Antichrist spirit does. If you haven't seen my video on Fight Club, I talk about this too, because Tyler Durden in the movie Fight Club is a great example of the Antichrist spirit promising a false salvation. Now, the thing about Nick is that it's even worse because he is someone who claims to know Christ, but he is really adding in all this extra stuff into his revolutionary ideology. Is the ideology of Groyperism is not compatible with Christianity. And the last thing I want to say is that you can know them by their fruits. If you've ever interacted with a Groyper, it's not good. I've had people message me, and they message me the most unhinged, immature stuff. It's like, and then they like, I'm Catholic, it's okay. They're harassing, and Nick often will call out people, and then the Groypers go and harass them. They give death threats, and this is not good. This is cult-like behavior. And I think Jay Dyer has done a really good job of critiquing this. And you can see Groypers who have called into Jay Dyer, and you see that the Groypers have a very non-Christian worldview. They don't care about philosophy, or at least the ones that we're seeing. A lot of them are younger and immature. They care about will to power. It's like, who cares who is right? We're just gonna force our ideas on others. It's a warrior mindset. It's a pagan, pre-Christian worldview, while claiming to be Christian, which is demonic. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope for the sake of this country, for young men, for the conservative movement, that Nick becomes more mature, that he is able to be transfigured by Christ, because I really think he has a lot of potential. He can still repent. God wants the salvation of everyone, every Groyper, every leftist, every person God cares about, is that we need to focus on healing society. And I don't think Nick is doing a really good job of healing society. I may get a lot of really bad comments on this video, so I may have to turn comments off to keep in line with YouTube's policy on comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. I just wish he would use his charisma and talents to bring people to Christianity and to Christ, and to just focus on that instead of these worldly things like politics, just spewing more venom into the world. Is just use that for good. Use that to glorify God. Thank you. God bless.